Hey everybody, and welcome to the Horn of Plenty channel. This is not an official podcast episode. We're gonna start doing short clips. We only record once a week, and there's been a lot of news to cover. And so one of the things that we're gonna try out is talking about things as they happen. Some of you know that we covered schools possibly opening in the fall. Myself, Vapi Chulo had very strong views, and Rico Grande agreed with me on some of the things that I had to say. Basically, what I said was that schools should not open up in the fall because it would cause too many public health concerns. We won't be talking about that too much because if you want to hear specific viewpoints, you can just go to the YouTube channel, find that video. It's about an 8-minute video, or you can listen to the whole podcast on whatever streaming platforms or the YouTube channel as well. What we really want to discuss is that we're seeing on the news that a lot of colleges, we're not sure what the public schools, charter schools, K through 12, we don't know what they're doing necessarily, but we do have a lot of information on colleges and universities opening up for the fall in in the midst of this virus still very much taking control of the economy and people's lifestyles, not just in this country, obviously, but universally. And so one of the reasons is obviously money. Money is going to be the reason that a bunch of organizations and companies decide to make their decisions. And colleges, we know, make a lot of their money through student fees, their resident hall programs, and their dining programs. And so a bunch of these schools, you can look it up, for the last 15, 20 years, there's a surplus of colleges now with the decrease of people attending colleges because there's so many options out there now that schools have been closing down. This pandemic is something that people did not foresee, and they have lost a lot of money. Vapi Chulo, how well, in case you didn't know, for college students that had to end their semester early, they were refunded a portion of their student fees, their dining fees, and their residential fees. That's a hit that colleges didn't know they were going to take. That was income that they already thought they were going to have for their academic year 2020 to 2021 academic cycle that they no longer have. If they were to close for fall 2020, they are completely not getting income from, again, their residential component, their dining component, and honestly, the majority of the student fees, because those student fees cover the activities that happen on campus, counseling services, health services, the gym, a bunch of those things. That's what the technology fees, that's mostly encompassing on the student fees. Most of these colleges will not survive. We saw that one of the schools up in Boston just absorbed a small college. We just seen 2 official announcements from 2 different schools that said they were going to shut down. These schools cannot afford to close down for the fall 2020 semester, and so they will be opening, the majority of them. Rico Grande, I've been talking a lot already. Anything you want to add before we talk about how these schools are even going to attempt to make this happen?
Yes. I think this whole entire situation has highlighted a couple of things in universities that it's been an open secret. It's not anything that anyone that goes to college is going to be shocked to figure out. But the entire, United States university system needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you open or not in the fall, the system that allowed for so much of these issues to occur hasn't benefited students at all. So I think when schools are looking to reopen and they're looking at their financial books, there should be some very serious questions about restructuring the university format to better enable students and produce individuals that are going to participate in the economy.
What would you suggest right off the bat? It sounds like you've been thinking about this for a while. Where are some, and I'm assuming you're thinking about mainly. We all know that in most organizations and more in most businesses, or maybe all, honestly, the number one cost is personnel. And so I'm assuming you thought about personnel that you think wouldn't need to exist in the future of higher ed.
Exactly. So if you were to look at, the university system 50 years ago compared to what it is now, there has been a massive expansion of administrative costs and salaries that are going to, a massively expanded, role of deans, all these other people that never existed before on the university campus. And what it has done, it is jacked up college tuition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of the things that jacked up college tuition, right? So you have massive administrative bloat. That's one. Two, colleges have started to compete with each other on all of the things that occur that are not in the classroom, right? So depending on your major. So if you are a science major or something that's very specialized, that's going to require a university faculty to be top in its field to matter. If you're not one of those things, the college you go to, I hate to say it, doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
The kids that are going to Caltech, MIT, yeah, they're going to be a cut above your average, science and math students, right? Now, the kids that major in history, gender studies, English, you're telling me a kid that goes to a state school in Wyoming versus a kid that goes to a state school in South Carolina are really going to have that much of a difference of literary interpretation?
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me that, oh my God, I read these books and I read these books, but now I'm better at reading books than you are
Right.
because I read my books in this. Like, no, that it doesn't work like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, we have all this competition outside of what is actually offered in the classroom. So your English education is going to be the same, but this school may have a really cool rec center, and this school has a big outdoor area that's cool, and this school is going to, offer this other program. So college for a lot of kids has become more about the amenities than it has become about the education.
Yeah, it's been there for a very long time, though. Honestly, if you look at colleges when they first started in the United States, they took the college system from overseas and brought it here to the United States. And what you saw was is that in the beginning, colleges were meant to just educate future leaders, future CEOs, and future philosophers. That's how colleges started it, and then they ended up adding math, science, and what have you. Right after the elite, like the elite of elite, that period was over. The lesser of the elites, still elite but much lesser, wanted to go to college because it was, for one of the reasons was, it was an escape from where they were. It was an escape from their parents, and so there was that luxury of, it was kind of, they treated it like a year-round camp. If you study the history of higher education, you actually see that the dean role existed to handle student conduct issues that existed way back in the inception of higher education in the United States, right? And so when barriers were lower for more students to come in, they came in and started. They said that we wanted student activities. And so they brought the student activities, and then that blossomed into, wow, college is the place to be, not because it could possibly get me more an edge in the economy, give me a job that is more stable, higher paying. Since the very beginning, there was a huge portion of it that said it was just the experience. These price tags, in my opinion, still reflect that today. These students, I've been working in the college system for a while now. When I ask students why are they here, they tell me they like the way the campus looks. They like that their friends are here. They like the community. It's to your point. They really don't focus on the educational aspect of it. If you, a lot of people who talk about the educational aspect talk about Ivy Leagues. It sounded like you were going to say something. What's up?
No, no, I'm listening.
Okay, so that's still what you're paying for today. And that's how these colleges make the majority of their money. It's the experience of going to college and not so much the academic portion of it. There are students that want to live in the residence halls. There are students that want to go to those off-campus parties. These students don't want, for the most part, again, I'm not speaking for all students elsewhere. A lot of students just want to take all of their classes online, stay at home, save money, get a good job, and call it a day. But a lot of these students want the college experience, and that's how these colleges make money. And that's why, again, most of the way that they make income is through their overpriced housing, their overpriced dining, and they're not just student fees. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, also, the structure of what you have to take to get a degree is antiquated.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll use myself as an example. Went to college, have my bachelor's degree, have a master's degree. Now, for my undergrad, I had to take 2 English classes, uh, philosophy class. My first year, I was at a Catholic university, so I had to take a theology class. Then I went to a public university, so I had to take, a class that focused around the urban experience because I was in inner city Cleveland. None of these classes prepared me to be a physics teacher. Not one of them. Not one of them. I did not need any of these classes in my life that was going to make me better at what I went to college for. So, for a lot of people, they enter into college without having a real idea of what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, look, you're 18 years old, you're 17 years old, maybe, depending on how old you are when you graduate high school. Chill, relax, live life, figure yourself out. Come back at 21 when you know what you want to do. Jump right into the program that is going to be whatever it is. For me, if I'm doing math and physics, I don't need 4 years of math and physics to get your degree.
Mm-hmm.
Take the classes you need that's going to give you the skills and the capabilities to be productive in the workforce the day you graduate. Take those classes and bounce. We've overinflated so much of the cost that, it's not needed. That, half of the courses you take are not needed to further your advancement in your career. That's
Mm-hmm.
one. 2, because of all of these extra amenities, the costs are soaring through the window, out the ceiling, into the stratosphere, astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
The 4-year price of college is, you can't pay it. You can't pay it with a regular job.
Mm-hmm.
Most college tuitions per year are higher than most people's individual yearly salary. Especially if you look at an elite school, a private school, some of these, Ivy Leagues and, tier 1 sub Ivies, $50,000 a year. That's more than the average United States citizen is making a year. That's higher than the medium salary of an employee in the United States.
That's a lot for, if you look at a lot of these counties, that's more than a household makes.
Right. So how can, if you're looking at college, it's a service, however you want to classify it. How can you justify a yearly cost being more than the income of the individual that would go there? And what job are you having to pay for this before you have the degree?
Right.
People go to college to get the degree, to give them the job that's going to help them, make ends meet and pay their bills. Now people are going to college accumulating tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt, only to graduate into a marketplace that says we don't need you. We don't have a place for you, or we have a place for you, but you're not going to get paid barely enough to pay back the massive bill you just got plus interest. Mm-hmm. It's strangling people with debt that they'll never they may be paying these bills back 30, 40 years before they could see a day wake up in the morning without debt.
Hmm.
So to me, it's like, look, this college, there was a .com bubble where everyone was investing in websites and different things, and it busted and it collapsed. A housing bubble that collapsed. This college bubble, if this virus isn't going to make it collapse, the student tuition and debt problem is going to make it collapse, and there's going to be a massive implosion of the college system.
What do you think is gonna burst it? What do you think is gonna be the final straw?
Eventually, the debt to income ratio is gonna straddle so many people where people are just going to default on the loans.
Hmm.
Like, I've been very fortunate in my life where I've had jobs where I've been able to pay it. But, with everything going on, I had to put loans into deferment. And if that happens for millions and millions of people that aren't paying loans, and yet when we look at the government response, they're not helping the students, they're helping debt collectors. They're bailing out the people responsible for collecting the paycheck instead of the people who need help making a paycheck.
Hmm.
So eventually it's like, look, you're going to have millions upon millions of people with this debt that they just can't pay it back. You put an interest rate on these things that, grows faster than what they could pay back on it. And where are they left at the end of the day? No one is looking out for any of these people. So, colleges could look at, okay, how do we reopen? What do we do? To me, the biggest solution is scale back as much as you can, get back to the true focus of what higher education is supposed to be, which is education.
Hmm.
You don't need 60,000 people in a football stand to get a degree. You don't. You, you don't need to be in a packed frat house with, kegs and bottles of alcohol and making out with a bunch of random people that you're never going to remember the next day to get a degree.
Bro, but here are the arguments for all those things that you just said. For the sports example, I mean, there's a common misconception that sports bring in tons of money. I know a lot of people think that it brings tons of money into the school. The actuality is that only in top Division 1 schools does athletics actually bring in income to the schools, right? But what they will tell you is that at the that sports are important to colleges because it adds to school spirit. That's the first thing. There is a lot of development that happens as an athlete that you really can't get as a student. You obviously develop in each, whether you're a student or an athlete. There is different forms of development, and there's still the same form of development as well. But then I think we need to talk about tradition when we have these conversations as well, because when you look at how American football was introduced, it was through the higher ed system. It was between two very well-known schools. I can't think of it from the top of my head. I'll fact check it when I'm done talking. But it was,
Maybe Harvard, Yale.
I think it was Harvard and Yale. But I'm gonna fact check it. I actually did a presentation on it. But it was two schools just having fun, and then it ended up being way more than just pickup games. It ended up being tournaments, and then more schools joined. And then the school that had the best football team, that's where all of the students wanted to go. And so that tradition we know here in America, and I would assume elsewhere in the world, is really hard to crack. You can throw logic at somebody all day, but as soon as they tell you, but this is how we've always done it, that conversation's over. Your point about the Greek life, go back to academics and don't do Greek life. If you look at the purpose of Greek life, when colleges serve that cognitive portion of development that you were talking about, but it also covers interpersonal development. Greek life was established to build on social skills. So that's the interpersonal component. If you're there and you're just there to hit that cognitive piece of it, You may have some real socially awkward people in the workforce that don't know how to get along with people, that don't know how to look past the differences of other people. And so a lot of people will debate you on college is very important because of that interpersonal part. That interpersonal part as well is when you're in college, you are forced to see people that don't look like you, to hear perspectives that you may have never heard in your life. And so that causes dissonance. That causes direct dissonance to that individual. And so we know that dissonance creates a person that actually is able to think more ways than just one. There's a lot of students that when they come into colleges, they either say there's a right way or a wrong way. A lot of people, until they enter college or enter the workforce, think just two ways. It's yes or no. But through college, that's what you learn. And again, this is going to your academic piece, but also there's a social component to it. There's a gray area. And so if we don't teach people to look at the gray area of things, we will live in a very boring world, and a world that is not so, I won't say accommodating, but more understanding of the views of different people. And so that's what a lot of people would argue. Now, this is, with all of that being said, I think there are a lot of schools that do that poorly, and that's what they say to get people in the door. That's my opinion. But countless research shows that the holistic development of students is really catered to in higher ed systems. You won't be getting the same, I promise you, you won't be getting the same, the student will not benefit as much as they can. Let's take money out of it. If there was no price tag attached, that student would not develop as quickly and as effectively if they were in a 4-year or 3-year online program than if they were in a college in real time. If they lived in the residence halls, if they lived 5 minutes away off campus, that social interaction is really important.
I think it depends. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Like if you're looking at Greek life and you're telling me that this is important because of, it's going to foster interpersonal connections, I'm saying, okay, that's fine. What have you done the last 12 years of your life? Like high school, it's not like you're in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Even I use myself as an example. My high school was fairly small. There was maybe 650 kids in the entire high school. Mm-hmm. My senior class was, I don't know, 130, 140 kids. Not big. If you look at, high schools in, Texas, Florida, big cities where there's like thousands of kids, the interactions are happening at a, much more frequent level just because there's so many more kids. Mm-hmm. But when you're, a student, if you're in high school, you're telling me you never had a group project, that you had to figure things out, that you never, and I can understand if you're from a small town, maybe there's a lot of people that kind of think the same, look the same. So you're not having that run in with diversity. So, okay, that's good. But how much is that worth dollar wise?
You also need, but you're also talking about high school when people are 14, 15, 16, 17. I mean, I think we could both agree that the older you get, I mean, we know what the brain stops finally, like you get the most out of your brain by like 26 or something crazy like that.
25, I think it stops developing.
Right. The older you get, the more effective you're going to be. In high school was not, I could get away with so much stuff in high school. High school, I didn't learn the importance of keeping my teammates accountable. I learned that in college. So I think we could both agree that there still is place for that in college. And I would personally argue that it's more effective in college or the workplace than high school.
I think the workplace, because once you get to the workplace, you're going to have some real consequences, if you can't work with someone. Right. But I think, some of, the stuff for the colleges, it's fine. If I go to college and I'm an engineer and I could do a lot of my work by myself and I'm an introvert, I don't need that kind of socialization because I'm not going to have it when I'm in the workplace. If I go to college and I'm going to major in actuarial science and I'm crunching numbers all day, I don't need to be part of a team because I don't do my stuff in a team. So it is, again, it's almost like, to the example of Okay, if I go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or any of these Ivy Leagues, and I walk into a classroom, a history class,
Mm-hmm.
is the content that I'm getting in that history class so much better than the content I might get at Ohio State or UCLA or Michigan? Maybe not. But the biggest benefit there is going to be the networking.
Right.
The people that you're going to meet in Harvard are going to, from a social economic standpoint and from an influence standpoint and from projection of future power standpoint, is going to be a whole lot different than a community school or local college.
Right.
So you're not really paying for the education. You're paying for the networking that is going to lead to something much more in the future.
Okay. So before we move on, the first intercollegiate game was between Harvard versus Yale back in 1852. Um, And so I know that NCAA says that the first college football game was played in 1869 between Rutgers and the College of New Jersey. But I mean, they're not the ones that really spearheaded like the effect of football in higher ed. It was the game that really did it was Harvard versus Yale back in 1852. Um, so Rico Grande, I agree with you to an extent. I agree with you that I think the price tag is really high. I think more my concern is mainly I feel like colleges aren't adapting to the jobs of tomorrow. I think a lot of schools are playing it safe and are still offering a lot of majors that are going to die out when you look at the when an individual looks at what do I get from getting a English degree, just as an example, a philosophy degree, just as an example. The reason I say that is that the person who wants to go to college every single year becomes the most educated one the year before. With a lot of these websites that are reviewing colleges, with social media taking off, with Gen Z being one of the few generations that know for sure what they want as far as like a product, um, that has magnified times 100, to be honest. But I mean, as a consumer, you only go where things exist. If you want to go to college, it's really competitive to go to those ones that are offering a major in AI. Right, they're offering certificates for drones. Excuse me. So I think that's really the issue there. I think there's cheaper. This is the other thing. Something that we didn't mention is a lot of income that comes in from colleges is also alumni driven. That's the donations that the alumni give. And in order for you to have an alumni base that is willing to donate money to the institution that they went to, you want to create a great experience. And most of it, when you talk to alumni, what they rarely talk about the academic portion of it. They talk about that social experience. It's those memories, those social memories that make them want to give the institution $20, $50, $100, all the way up to paying for whole buildings and stadiums to be made, and obviously get their the building or the stadium named after themselves. I don't know if a school can sustain that going through an online model, but that's actually a good segue because that's what they're going to attempt to do. So a lot of these schools have to open up again. From the very beginning we talked about that they have to make money, and so a lot of schools are proposing that half of the studies, they want to break people up to teams. This is just one way to go about it. There's like 8 different things that exist right now, but they want, let's say you're team A and team B. Team A, you're going to real life class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Team B, on that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you're going to class online, and then you switch. That's one way that a lot of schools are trying to go about it. If you have been in the supermarket in the last couple of weeks, you know that there is maybe only one section where you can go in and only one section that you can go out to promote better social distancing. That is something that schools are looking to do. We actually have an image on the screen. So this is probably not coming out on a podcast platform, so if you're already on YouTube, but you put it down because there hasn't really been anything on the screen for a while, put your screen out now. Okay, so you can see on this image that student A and B are going out in this way. There's some barriers put out, and then they're exiting this way. It's the same thing that's been going on in your supermarkets and your mega stores. Something that you have seen is the plexiglass barrier in some bodegas and some establishments, social services, what have you. And so they're pitching that there is plexiglass to protect not just the students, but mainly in this situation, it looks like the faculty member in between them, right? And then also you're trying to separate your students 6 feet apart. And from these images, you see that they are assuming that everybody's going to wear a mask. This professor here is wearing a mask, and the students, even though they are 6 feet apart, are wearing masks. So this is one of the ways that they are going to justify, hey, we are meeting all of the regulations to make sure that COVID-19 does not spread. Please come to our campuses. Before I go to other images, Rico Grande, give me your take.
I think the idea is interesting in design. It's all conceptual. I look at the picture on the left, and there's like an indoor and an outdoor only, but not all colleges are going to be designed in a way that's going to make this easily tenable. Mm-hmm. Our doors going to be just conveniently that far apart where you could have one indoor and one outdoor. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of times there, one building will just have a double door entrance where people are coming in and out.
Right.
Well, to put up a barrier like that is going to be difficult. Mm-hmm. The 6 feet apart, again, I've been in lecture halls where there's, a couple hundred kids that you could kind of easily maybe, limit the class to half of the size and spread out. And I've been in some smaller rooms where it was a more cozy atmosphere, and, having everyone 6 feet apart, you're going to have maybe like 5 kids in that class.
Right.
So is it doable? Yes. There would have to be more offerings of the class, which would mean more time that the professors are spent in the classroom,
right,
and less time that the professors would be doing all of the other myriad of things that they do: research, writing, traveling, right, giving, speeches. So it is going to be very interesting to see how the logistics of all of this actually happens. We could bring up a model like they have here, and we could design it however we want. But all of these models then have to fit into the current infrastructure of all of the college buildings. Right. So that's going to present quite a different challenge.
Right.
I will say that having maybe like a hybrid model where some of the learning is online and some of it is in person could be very productive. And I use this from a personal example. When I was in college, I took maybe 5 online classes. And one of them I took was a online chemistry class. Now, you can't do all chemistry online. You have to do some of it in person, which like the labs. And our tests, our tests were proctored in person by the professor. So no opening the book and, having those Quizlet tabs open to try to cheat online, mm-hmm. Which I don't think Quizlet even existed back then. To date myself, this was like 2009, 2010. Mm-hmm. Don't know how old Quizlet is. And what ended up happening, because I was mostly responsible for teaching myself, the professor would, have limited interaction online, as I took a much higher stake in my studying and my reading and my, doing the homework and the practice examples, that when I went into the lab, and the lab had a mix of online and, traditional setting kids, I breezed through the lab. Like the quizzes and everything were easy because I had taught myself. So I think once you put learning into the hands of the students, if you're there for the right reasons, you're gonna benefit because you're gonna be driving your own education.
So I want to say two things. One, I want to talk about your example of, you see, it's nice in theory, but I mean, how many people are going to be in class? And so, yeah, typically this example in the picture on the screen is that there's 48 typically in a classroom, so that would be 24 during COVID-19 when the schools open up in the fall, right? So already, again, that's back to the hybrid model of half the people are there, brick and mortar for lack of a better term right now, and then the other half are online. The other point is that I want to make is I think sometimes we use ourselves as examples too much. I know you well enough to know that you are very well driven and that you have always been interested in academia, or at least like when it mattered to you the most, whether that be high school or college. I think we can all acknowledge that a lot of people aren't that way. I don't want to get into, because as much as I know you, I don't know enough of you to say this with confidence, but I want to think about people who may have not been in good school systems where what they feel like is the benchmark for doing well is not the same when they enter college. And so that added support that they get through their advisors or their professors or a tutor, and they need to be able to see somebody face to face, will impact them negatively. And so I would disagree with you in that it gives, well, actually, I don't disagree with you. I think it forces people. Your point was that it will have people be in charge of their learning more. Yes, I agree with you there. I don't think that that would be the most successful approach for different kinds of students. I think about the international student. Granted, I mean, if it's going to be on fully online, international students maybe wouldn't really enroll. But let's say they're using the hybrid model. That like research shows in abundance that if an international student or a marginalized student in whatever identity they have, if somebody doesn't help them the first time or the second time, they already are disconnected and no longer will ask for help. There are a lot of people who need help to get through college, and so that would be my point there.
No, for that point, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, um, I was a student that always loved learning. I graduated high school with high grades, graduated college with high grades. I'm very self-driven. Yeah, so for self-driven students, it's not going to be an issue. I couldn't tell you a single of my college advisors' names.
Mm-hmm.
The only time I ever walked in their office was to make sure that paperwork was lined up the right way. So I think that was maybe the first, like during the first year when I was just making sure all my gen eds were right, and then when I applied for graduation.
Right. Right.
Other than that, I had, oh, you need this course and that course. All right, I registered for it online, and never. They didn't know me. I didn't know them.
Right.
But
So
that's not. I mean, there was kids in there like every other day.
there you go. Exactly. So I think it depends on the student that that you are, honestly. So then let's move over to the residential hall component. So here you see the picture again. We already stated that it's no surprise that the residential component of a college generates a lot of income. Those buildings already exist. You have to pay for obvious staff members that operate programming in their custodial staff. You have to keep the lights on, whatever amenities are offered. But the revenue that you make, assuming that you have a good influx of students opting into residential services and not going on campus, that you do make a good amount of income out of it. In this picture in the left, you see that there is a residence hall designed for 3 students, and then after it's just 2. I personally know some schools that are opting into just doing 1 person per room because they're expecting that a lot of students are going to take the year off and do online classes that their universities are doing, like full online, not hybrid. A combination of that with community colleges just taking those credits, those gen eds online, or whatever their majors are, that the school would accept when everything goes back to normal, right? They're saving that money that way because they have their parents telling them that this is not one. I care about your safety. I'd rather you stay home. And two, the money that you're spending is which is most likely going to be the same exact price tag as the last academic year pre-COVID-19 does not make financial sense. Economically, that decision makes negative sense. You can't even argue that it's for the experience, the price tag is for the experience. All of these programmatic efforts that they have in the past will not exist or they won't be as fun because they have to abide by COVID-19 safety guidelines. What are your thoughts?
To me, regardless of, what you do within the classroom, the stuff that happens outside of the classroom is where the biggest stumbling blocks are going to occur.
Which is good in my opinion.
Uh, yeah, I mean, you can space out the kids in the class as much as you want, right? Now, once the kids get out of the class, I don't believe that going from a triple to a double is ultimately going to make the kind of dent that they want in social interaction.
I
And
agree with you.
I mean, time and time again, I mean, we saw with lockdown orders, they were being defied left and right. I mean, I remember seeing barn parties where there was like hundreds of people in the barn. Um, this Memorial Day weekend where people were flooding the beaches. I think there was a pool in Texas that had like hundreds of people in the pool.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now let's think, and those are all adults, so let's make it to, kids that just got out of high school are just now experiencing true freedom for the first time. They're young, sexually curious, and
Mm-hmm.
adventurous. There's no, okay, two beds in a room. That doesn't stop me from opening my door
Right.
and letting, whoever in. And, who's going to enforce all of this? Like, on a traditional college setting, you would have, maybe an RA, RD, a resident director, someone in charge of a building going in, managing these things. And that's tough enough. I mean, I was never in that kind of position. I know Vapi Chulo has some background there.
Absolutely.
But you can't put out a fire in every single room every single day.
Right.
You know, if the biggest thing that you may have had to worry about, hey, there's a noise complaint, let me go see what's going on. All right, there's a little thing. I'm gonna have to confiscate some alcohol, bust up a little party. That's one thing. Can you stop kids from having four or five people in a room just hanging out, watching TV, playing video games? Like, you can't control the flow, the flow of bodies moving around. To me, this is just where it becomes nearly impossible to monitor. Like, okay, there's two beds, so there's only two people in the room, but maybe one of the guys is leaving, and then another person has a boyfriend, girlfriend come over. They do their thing. They're, exchanging fluids in any kind of way that they want to. They leave, so the girl leaves or the guy leaves, goes to another building. If they're sick, now it's just transmitting. It's transmitting everywhere. So to me, it's just, if you're going to bring like a model of spread, you could take a bed out, but to me, it's just not nearly effective of a measure either as a college to say, okay, we're doing our part, or as a student to come in, like if you're worried about contracting an illness, to say, all right, I'm going to be safe, other than having one room, one bed, and never leaving.
Right.
So to me, it's kind of impractical. Um, especially if you look at schools that are very resident driven, like having high populations of kids that are on campus versus some inner city schools that have high number of commuter students.
Mm-hmm.
Some schools with higher on campus populations are really going to suffer if they have to scale back. uh, what are you operating at, 50% capacity?
Mm-hmm.
And then, if I'm a kid, if I'm a student now coming into the situation, what am I paying for? I'm paying to be isolated. I'm paying to be separated by people. I'm paying to not have the experience of going to the football game, of not being able to be at the party, of not being able to eat in a dining hall. I mean, because dining halls like is all buffet style.
Right.
So even the concept of going to a dining hall and eating with your friends, and if you think about people picking up the plates, picking up the glasses, the silverware, like it's a logistical nightmare
Right.
that these colleges now have to figure it out. And it is not an envious position. I mean, the person that figures it out and does a really good job deserves all the accolades that they could get.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, unfortunately for so many of these college age kids, yeah, their experience is going to be drastically different than what you or I could have had.
Rico Grande, you mentioned dining. And so I wanted to bring this image up. This is the before and after. Again, arbitrary number, divide that by half. That's the accurate number that you have for the after picture. And so what you see is that, again, the plexiglass is separating the chefs from the consumers, which is the students or the faculty member, staff, whoever's visiting the college. There's a designated one-way traffic. There's one way to enter, one way to leave. There's a grab and go option for people who do not even want to be within the premises. And again, it's divided by half. Listen, at this point, I don't even want to go to this establishment. I'm microwaving ramen in my room.
Yeah, I'll order pizza, do whatever.
But so that's the end of that article. I want to bring up so Dr. Fauci talked about was interviewed by a couple of individuals, and people were talking about whether it makes sense for schools to open up, right? So he does a really good job of not. This is how you can tell he's been in the game for a while. He doesn't answer any of the questions directly. He answers them in a way where it's just like there is no real answer. It's a case by case. Like the case by case is dependent on the answer to the possibilities, right? And so one of the people asked him, "Hey, right now university leaders are trying to figure out what to do in the fall. What do you think they should be considering at this point if they want to reopen?" His answer was, "I don't think it's going to be a one-size-fits-all. I think it's going to depend on the location of where the particular university or place of higher ed is in, the demographic of the students, where they're coming from. All of these have to be taken in account." A number of presidents have been in discussion with us, with the task force, with the vice president, and with others, talking about creative ways. Some of them are good, some of them are lackluster, what have you. Okay. Nothing really there. That's a cop-out answer, right? But it makes sense. There is one point that he made about testing that I want to get your point in. Here we go. Once people are back on campus and classes have resumed, what do you think would be the baseline amount of testing that you would want to see at a university? Dr. Fauci says that's a good question, and that's something that has been discussed with varying interpretations. I think you could get the first baseline, and then you do what's called surveillance testing. That's what I thought was very important. And that's where you don't test every single person, but every week or two you selectively test a representative sampling to determine if there is a below the radar screen amount of transmissions that you're not detecting, because the chances of there being asymptomatic infection in a cohort of young, healthy individuals is much greater than the chance in the general population. This just caused more questions for me because, again, how frequently are you testing, and is that an appropriate way to go about it? If I had it my way, I would test everybody at once. If you want to come into the university, and then I would want you to be responsible and let me know if you went home for the weekend, if you went to a different state, if you went somewhere where people weren't practicing safe social distancing. I'll let you know that we have free test to see if you have it or not, and then we will refer you because you are a threat. And so we'd rather you get tested. I, again, last week stated that I don't trust entirely in a lot of people to do that. And so I don't think this is an effective way to go about it. What do you think?
No, I agree that it's not effective. Even, when he says, no one answer is going to solve all of the university's problems. So if I'm looking at a university that's more rural, right? So they have a large on campus community where there's not a lot of traffic in or out. Some tests like this might be a little bit more productive and reliable than using these same kind of tests in larger cities. So I 1 year of college I was in New York City, and then the rest of my college I was in Cleveland, Ohio. There's no way that you're going to tell me that you could give a test to these students in two urban environments. I mean, New York, much, much, much larger than Cleveland, and then use that as a baseline that's going to have any kind of reliability even 3 days after you take the test. Let's say you test part of a campus community one day. Even 10% of that community go out, do something, come back. And, if it's asymptomatic, it could be spreading like wildfire and you would never know because you may not have, the reports, the coughing, the tiredness, all the symptoms that kind of, trigger a test to occur. So you could have a large student population kind of contracting the virus, but not being symptomatic, where maybe only 10% are showing symptoms, but maybe 40 to 50% have the virus. And who are they mingling with? Well, one, they're mingling with each other, but two, they're mingling with the college professors. Now, the college professors are by and large older individuals that have spent, however many years in their craft. But, safe to say that, middle age and up for university professor, tenured professor, they've been there a while. So now the people responsible for their education in the in-person format is part of perhaps the most targeted or, the most affected population of people that get it, where, if they get it, the possibility for serious issues is higher than a young person. So, okay, you might say, oh, we need some kind of ways to test, but how you coordinate this in a way that's going to be, one, reliable, meaningful, and, helps you project out for the safety of everyone is another challenge that people have to overcome. So, yeah, you could do it. I just don't know how far it's going to get you in the long term.
Okay. Listen, I mean, I think what remains certain is that the majority of these schools will open up by any means necessary. Next week, at some point, I'm not sure when. Actually, maybe tomorrow. At some point within the next 5 days, I'm confident in that number. There are going to be three college presidents. The last time I read that article, that will be talking to Senate about their creative and safe ways to open their campuses to get the blessing of politicians to open up, because you already have the administrators in higher ed giving it a push. You have a lot of residents that are eager to start the country back up. You have the president who is trying to rush everything open, and so they're going to be making their case so that there is really no backlash when they decide to open up. The majority of these schools are going to open up, and I'm just curious to see what happens. I'm still waiting for numbers of the increase of coronavirus recipients, for lack of a better term right now, caused by Memorial Day weekend. I know that there is a lot of information that already exists, but I want a number countrywide. There's a lot of statewide numbers right now that indicate that there is now an increase in unsurprisingly, right? There should be unsurprising to a lot of people. There's been an increase. I mean, the fall semester is only 2 months away. Excuse me, 3 months away. I don't understand how much progress you make in 3 months without a vaccine to pitch that this is a good idea, in my opinion.
No, I agree. It's the leaders, the admins are going to make their case to try to open up. I certainly understand from a business perspective, which let's face it, universities are business.
Yes.
They're not purely in the spirit of just teaching. It is major economic incentive behind it to open up. I mean, hey, if these presidents don't get these kids tuition dollars, their salary goes down. So
Right.
they're ultimately looking at their way of life and getting their money. So yeah, I mean, do you make a business decision over an ethical one? That's the dilemma that a lot of these executives are going to have to wrestle with over the next few months.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for everybody who stayed this long with us. I am Vapi Chulo. That's Rico Grande, and we talk about absolutely anything that we want to talk about on any given day. It could be what type of conversation like you heard today. It could be about the cultural phenomenons that exist, the new dance challenges, the top 22 technological transformations of the world in the next decade or so. And so if you're interested in hearing our opinions on those, we encourage you to subscribe. Check out the podcast and whatever streaming platform that you are on. We're on basically everything except Apple Music. And again, we encourage you to subscribe here on YouTube. Engage in the discussion below as well. If there's something that you agreed with us or disagree with us, feel free to leave a comment, and myself or Rico Grande will get to you. With that being said, we hope that you stay safe. Please make very wise conditions. Tell the people that you're around that you love them, and have a good one. Peace.
See ya.